What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another episode of the NBA Preview. Now, for those who missed the last episode, as always, there will be an annotation in the top right hand corner, link in the description, and if you watch the video in its entirety, not only will there be an annotation for the last episode, but also a playlist for all the episodes of the NBA Preview so you can catch up on all the videos that you missed. But in today's video, finally, we are talking about some more exciting teams. No disrespect to like the Grizzlies and the Jazz and all the other stuff, but from here on out, a lot of these teams are going to be much more interesting, and to kick us all off with this is a Philadelphia 76ers, by far one of the more interesting teams in the NBA right now. Now, for those out there who are unaware what's going on in Philly, let me just catch you up on a tea real quick. So a couple years ago, this man named Sam Hinkie, he became the general manager of the organization, and he decided to have a brilliant idea of, why do we have to keep trying to win games? Why not just purposely lose games, tank, get draft picks, and then draft, hopefully, our next franchise player? So what he decided to do was trade away all his assets, get draft picks and young players in return, and this has been going on for the past 4 or 5 years now. Drafted him some players, some hit, some miss. I think a lot of people don't want to give Sam Hinkie the credit that he also had a couple of players that really didn't pan out. But on the more positive side, we definitely have some players that have a lot of promise, such as Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and their last draft pick in Markelle Fultz. So everything seems like it's going to be on the up and up. And for people out there who aren't wondering if they're going to make the playoffs or not, or what are my beliefs, if you're able to keep up with some of the teams, so far I actually do have this team making the playoffs roughly around the 7th seed. Now, all of that has some contingencies behind it, and actually, speaking of contingencies and exceptions, probably one of the biggest exceptions is Joel Embiid and his health, which actually leads us to the summer of social media.
Joel, barring any setbacks, how many games do you realistically expect to play this season?
It's hard to tell. Depends. Cause it depends on my body and depends how the team handle it. If I could play 82 games, I would, but I'll be honest, I don't think I'll play 82 games. That's not happening.
Now, if you're a Philadelphia 76er fan, that definitely is not good news. Joel Embiid is a big man who's been suffering from injuries practically his entire career. Matter of fact, it's not even practically, it's been his entire career. And not only has it been going on when he was in the NBA, but also he was suffering injuries before he even entered the league in college. So this is something that's definitely been a big concern for the organization and the fan base. And moving forward, I don't necessarily know how it's going to pan out for the rest of the team, because a lot of things really do fall on the shoulders of Joel Embiid being a great player, or at least being healthy and being able to stay on the floor. But with that being said, that actually leads us into our contracts and our depth charts, because when we look at the contracts, that's what's going to be really, really interesting, and I have a pretty good storyline for you all to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to the new signings, they have a whole bunch of veterans, which in my personal opinion, I actually like this. The fact that you have a whole team filled with a whole bunch of players, they ain't nothing but teenagers and 20-some-year-old players. They definitely need some consistency and some veterans on this team. I don't necessarily believe that any of these players are leaders by any stretch of the imagination. Players such as Chris Humphries, Amir Johnson, and Emeka Okafor have been bouncing around the league for quite some time now. But JJ Redick, he's definitely consistent. Matter of fact, he's a definition of consistency. He's a consistent three-point shooter. He comes in, does his job, and nothing more, nothing less. But he definitely will be able to aid out the spacing when it comes to this team. Then when it comes to overpaid players, it is JJ Redick. $23 million for his services definitely is overpaid. However, it is only for 1 year. And the reason why they did that is because, one, they got to spend the money, and two, you don't want to keep holding up your contracts moving forward, especially because what's going to happen next year with some of these expiring contracts, which under expiring contracts it's complicated. Now, the reason why it's complicated is because there's a couple of pieces that are moving around, a lot of team options. And matter of fact, let's just look at this real quick, because this is where my belief for the quote-unquote process, it gets kind of shaky. So when it comes to our expiring contracts, it's a pretty good handful of them. Ben Simmons will technically be expiring. However, he has 2 team options. Definitely the 76ers will express their rights to use those team options, so that's not that big of a deal. And the same thing can be said about Dario Saric. However, the 4 or 5 names that really pop up out of this is Jahlil Okafor. Again, they have a team option, but after the team option, the next season after that, they have to address what's going to happen with Jahlil Okafor moving forward. Same thing can be said about Justin Anderson and TJ McConnell. But then the 2 players at the bottom, I mean, Nick Stauskas is Nick Stauskas, so that's not really a big deal. But it's really Joel Embiid. That's basically what I'm coming to. Joel Embiid, for people out there who don't know, he is a free agent after this next upcoming season. Now, granted, he is a restricted free agent, and that's because he's coming off his rookie contract, so you get a little leeway there. However, it will be very interesting to see how much money they're willing to throw at Joel Embiid. And so Joel Embiid comes out this next upcoming season and only plays, 30-some games. Again, it's going to be interesting. It's something that I'm pretty sure the Sixers fan base and the Sixers themselves, they don't want to give up on Joel Embiid, but the reality has to start kicking in if a team such as the Brooklyn Nets or some of these other very, very desperate teams, maybe even the Phoenix Suns, who have a lot of money to throw at some of these players, if they're willing to be like, you know what, I like Joel Embiid, I'm going to throw him a near max contract. It's a very legitimate question. Are the Sixers going to match max money the same way that the Washington Wizards matched Otto Porter's contract? Because again, the Brooklyn Nets were desperate and they threw a max contract at Otto Porter. But also, if they do decide to keep him, especially for a lengthy contract, what does that mean for some of these other players? So again, like I stated before, when it comes to a player such as Jahlil Okafor, again, they have a team option for this next upcoming offseason, but after that, they still have to address some of these players. And so if you give the money to Joel Embiid, then there's less money, obviously, to divvy out for the rest of the players. So this is probably a big reason why I don't necessarily believe in a quote-unquote process, but I'll get onto that later on. Let's go ahead and look at this depth chart real quick. So looking at the depth chart, if everyone is healthy, I'm going to tell you right now, this is very impressive. This is the reason why I have them making the playoffs, regardless of how young their core is. So when it comes to the starters, we got Markelle Fultz, JJ Redick in the backcourt, Ben Simmons at the 3, and then rounding up the 4 and the 5, Dario Saric and Joel Embiid. Coming off the bench, we have McConnell, Anderson, Covington, Okafor, Bayless, like a good handful of players. I'm not going to lie to you. I do like this rotation. I like it actually about 12 men deep, actually, to be completely honest with you. And not only that, pause. But not only that, I like the flexibility with this lineup. A lot of people are speculating that Markelle Fultz might not even start in the beginning of the season, and they're going to slide Ben Simmons at the point guard position and then move in Anderson or Covington in the starting lineup, which I would enjoy watching. I don't think Markelle Fultz is there just yet to be a starting point guard. However, Ben Simmons, I think the learning curve may be a little easier for him because of his height and his size. And so putting Ben Simmons at the point, JJ Redick at the 2 to help spacing, Robert Covington at the 3, and then at the 4 you have Dario Saric, and then at the 5 you have Joel Embiid. The spacing is going to be ridiculous. And speaking of spacing and the promise on this team, that actually leads us to our spotlight player of the day. And actually, it's not one player, it's the group of players that are known as the quote-unquote Feds. Now, for people out there who don't know what the Feds are, F-E-D-S, it's a acronym for the young talent that's on this team that I think they made up themselves, which I don't necessarily know how I feel about that, but we're just going to go on with it. So the F stands for Markelle Fultz. Fultz is a combo guard that was selected in his last draft class, who has the ability to handle the ball like some point guards, but also has some attributes to a scoring game that would immediately compare him to some 2 guards. This type of dynamic player is definitely needed with this organization because when it comes to the perimeter, even though yes, Ben Simmons shows a lot of promise, Markelle Fultz will definitely aid him when it comes to scoring. Then when it comes to the E, that is Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is a 7-foot big man, like I stated before, suffering from injuries, but I will go on record in saying if Joel Embiid can stay healthy, he will immediately put himself in the conversation to be the most talented big man in NBA history. Joel Embiid can handle the ball, he can stretch the floor out, finish around the rim, post games on Hakeem mode, like Hakeem the Dream mode. And then on the defensive end, I can definitely see him be an elite level defender. So you have that inside. Then when it comes to the D, which is something that I think a lot of people pause. The D stands for Dario Saric. His dynamic play is definitely needed with his organization. Played overseas and is able to bring some of that overseas flavor into the NBA. And the reason why I like him so much is due to him being very dynamic. A forward who can handle the ball, a solid passer, a very high basketball IQ, spaces the floor out. And I don't want to compare him to anyone just yet, but I can definitely see him playing like a Manu Ginobili type of role on this team. Again, coming off the bench, but being very, very important. And during some of those crunch time lineups, he's definitely going to get the play later on down the road. And then when it comes to the S, we have Ben Simmons. I've already done a video on him, so I'm not going to go into too much details. If you want to check that out, I'll make sure I put that in the top right-hand corner as well. But Ben Simmons, some people have claimed he's 7 feet tall. If he's not 6'11", 6'10", who cares? The fact that he's that tall and able to handle the ball like a guard has a high basketball IQ, especially when it comes to passing. The one thing that definitely concerns me when I'm looking at these preseason games, he's not the scorer that I think he's going to be, but still someone that's going to be extremely interesting. And so when you add them together with all of their promise, their dynamic play, and hopefully they can all stay healthy, this is definitely a core of players that I could see giving some real problems to the NBA within the next 3 to 4 years. And I would go as far as saying if they can stay healthy, they're definitely favorites to win a championship once all of this Golden State Warrior, Cleveland Cavaliers back and forth transpire, and players such as Curry and KD and LeBron, they get much older. But with that being said, I'm a realist, a bit of a pessimist, so I understand that everything isn't perfect, which thus leads us to our Twitter question of the day. Now, when it comes to our Twitter question of the day, this is something that I've consistently heard, and I'm going to reiterate myself real quick, but I've also made a video about it, so I'll leave that in the top right hand corner. But do you trust the process? And I'll be brief, wrap it up real quick, because I do have to wrap up this video. So the reason why I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the process is because of 3 reasons. One, this idea of just tanking to get talent is oversimplifying a very complex process of actually rebuilding, which then leads us to the second reason why, is because of the financial implications of just drafting 3 or 4 top 10 players. OKC literally suffered from the exact same problem where they had James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and they had to make a decision on which one they wanted to lose. There's absolutely no way that they can pay all of these players, Embiid, Simmons, Fultz, all of them. They can't pay all of them and then still fill out their roster with competent talent. They just cannot do it. But the biggest reason why I'm not the hugest fan of the Sam Hinkie process is because Sam Hinkie was drafting talent and not necessarily drafting fit. I understand you still have to get that star athlete player, that franchise changing player, but when you get to the point where you're just drafting just to be drafting players and you don't care that you just drafted Noel, Okafor, and Embiid like one after another, and they all play the exact same position, and then a year before that you drafted Marcus Carter-Williams, who also cannot space the floor, and so no one really fits with one another, that's a problem. And also when you're dealing with Embiid, everyone knew that he was suffering injuries before he entered the NBA, his first 2 years in the NBA. Last year was his 3rd year, he only played 30 some games, and here we are entering his 4th year on an expiring contract, and he's openly stating before the NBA season has even begun that not only will he not be available for 82 games, but he doesn't even necessarily know if he's going to be prepared to be available for game 1 of the regular season. I hope this team stays healthy, and I hope this team stays together, because I do want to figure out what's going to happen. And unfortunately, Sam Hinkie no longer is a general manager, so we don't necessarily know what Sam Hinkie would have done. But with all that being said, people, leave a comment in the comment section below, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and thumbs up, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.